Sanjeev sir, Sanjeev.
Yeah. Good afternoon. I hope I'm audible. Honorable Chief Minister, Shri Sanjeev Chopra, my very distinguished friend and Chief Secretary Suresh Gupta, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Additional Chief Secretary, Director General of Police, senior colleagues, Members of Parliament, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen, especially those who have been specially invited to this program, who superannuated over the last 2 years. I think it's a great gesture on behalf of the government of Sikkim to have called the entire family together. Over the last 3 hours, I have enjoyed listening to the presentations of the various district magistrates. I've also enjoyed going through the cultural program. I've enjoyed going through what Ravindra Thailand, how we introduced the subject, and of course the way our Chief Secretary here explained the entire concept of what it is to run a cabinet government, what is the element of trust which must prevail between the political leadership and the administrative hierarchy that runs it. In fact, but for COVID, it would have been a pleasure to be with all of you. And many of you may not be aware that I have a very strong Sikkim connect, because I started my professional career as an assistant magistrate in Darjeeling district and was then posted as ASD of Kalimpong. We are next door neighbors, and certainly I have seen from then to now how all the development indices in Sikkim have far outpaced the growth and development in my own subdivision of Kalimpong. So kudos and compliments to all those who have been responsible for giving Sikkim this excellent growth trajectory. I have kept up my interest in this region, this beautiful region of Kalimpong, Bhutan, Sikkim, Darjeeling, the lovely tapestry of languages, cultural practices, and religious beliefs. And I must say that today, Sikkim is a leading example of a small and beautiful state which has not only retained its identity, but has also shown the way on a host of parameters, from organic farming, which is quite well known, to higher education initiatives, about which Vice Chancellor Grewal just spoke to us about, and also about initiatives like spiritual tourism, mindfulness retreats, and many more. I would like to compliment the political mentorship and the administrative leadership of the state for their sterling performance. I must thank the Chief Secretary Suresh Gupta for choosing a subject on the civil services, past, present and future. You see, at one level it is a very general subject, but then it has very deep philosophical implications. There is simply no dearth of quotes on the past, present and future. In fact, if you were to Google this subject, you find 300 quotes on the subject. And also about how the past, present and future are inextricably linked. However, one starts looking at the subject critically. One realizes that we are talking about the institution of governance, which is continuously evolving. Over time, the meanings, symbols, and perspectives change so completely, especially when it comes to institutions of governance, whose temporal and spatial dimensions far exceed those of individuals, however powerful. Because what I'd like to share with you is that while individuals have a finite life, institutions transcend the lives of individuals, and it is institutions that we are more concerned with. Let me also say that in the past, when we look at this relationship of the past, present and future, and about the institutions of governance, one thing becomes very clear, and that is that in the past, governance was based on fear. Today, governance is based on trust and confidence. And in the future, it will be based on partnership, transparency, and information sharing. This in turn implies that our institutional response and readiness will have to be very different. Because fear is based on rigid hierarchy, where every indiscretion is met with immediate recompense. Trust is an enterprise of sharing the common being, and partnership is about dialogues and the realization that optimal solutions may be found outside the ambit of how we currently look at the paradigm. I mentioned briefly earlier, and now let me elaborate on what is it which distinguishes individuals from institutions. Individuals have a lifetime in terms of decades, and the most powerful individual will also have his influence over a period of time. But institutions transcend centuries. And when it comes to the life of an institution, one reckons not with the individual whims and fancies of individuals who make the institution, but on how the institution itself relates to the external environment and its ecosystem. In other words, how does the institution impact those around it, and in turn, how is it impacted? Friends, throughout the history of the world, as we have known it, kingdoms, empires, republics, city-states, monastic regimes, some sovereign functions have to be done. Taxes have to be collected, armies have to be paid regularly, justice has to be dispensed, and civic order has to be maintained. As an institution, civil services have always been connected with governance, state power, and working for large public systems. Our predecessor service, the ICS, saw the transformation from being essentially revenue collectors under the East India Company to the consolidation of the empire and the maintenance of public order as the main frame. This transition, as many of us are aware, happened in 1858. And it was after the Queen's proclamation that the educated class of Indians started aspiring for this exam. What is more, the demand for simultaneous examinations in UK and India was one of the main demands of the Indian National Congress. And the first of the series of public lectures in the country, Professor Surendranath Banerjee, was on the subject of simultaneous examinations and also for raising the age to the ICS from 21 to 24 years. The point to note is that they were not asking for any relaxation of standards, only parity in terms of opportunity. I must mention here that during the freedom movement, there were many differences of opinion amongst our leaders on the ICS, and many of them had individual issues with members of the ICS. Sardar Patel, Pandit Nehru, Subhash Bose, all of them had their own differences with the ICS as individuals. But it was Sardar Patel, and as Suresh had mentioned earlier, took up cudgels on behalf of the service, and when the Secretary of State wanted to dismember the service in 1946, just before the British were about to leave India, the Sardar realized that it would not be possible. I won't use the word it not be possible, but there would have been many hurdles if the ICS had not been retained. And therefore, as the Home Member of the Interim Cabinet, on the 21st and 22nd of October 1946, he had a meeting with the premiers of all the 11 provinces of British India at that point in time, and a general consensus was agreed upon that we shall continue with the ICS, and we should also have a new examination for the IAS, the IPS, the Foreign Service, and the Central Services, and that's how the first examination took place in 1947. Later, as the Minister in charge of the States Department, he extended the All India services to all the princely states, many of which then became chief commissionerates, some of which were merged into the neighboring provinces, and some became unions of states themselves. Well, the point to note is that what Sardar Patel had envisaged was that you will not have united India unless you have a good All India service, which has the freedom and the independence to speak its mind. So on that yardstick, not only have the All India services stood the test of time, they have shown great resilience and have moved forward with great panache. Before I talk about what has changed and the ecosystem that needs to change, let me talk about what has not changed. What has not changed in the civil services is the aristocracy of merit. Rather, if anything, the competition has become even more intense, but it has also become more intense. The highlight of today's civil services exam is the ability of the aspirants to put in consistent hard work over a wide range of compulsory subjects. The merit-based recruitment and the very high credibility of UPSC has certainly been a very important factor in making the civil services so acceptable, not only to the political leadership, but to everybody across this country. Absolute transparency in selection also gives confidence to both the union and the state governments that their interests are in the best hands of young women and men in the country. I would go one step further. Now that we have a three-tier system of governance, the officers of the All India services, especially the IAS, also man the Zilla Panchayats and the Municipal Corporation, and therefore it's a unique feature that the All India services manage to continue and maintain a proper sense of administrative continuity at all levels. The All India services also perform the very important role of creating the informal network between the centre and the states. And the fact is that most of us who have been both in the union and the state governments, have seen an entire range of political parties change power, and it's a great factor that for all of us it's been the opportunity to work across the political spectrum, and I think vice versa. The political spectrum also gains a lot when it sees that it has officers who have worked with an entirely different range of people. Now we come to the trajectory of civil services. How have we changed over the years? You know, the fact is that when India became free, or when we were independent, life expectancy was low, the bulk of the population was illiterate, we were totally dependent on agriculture and other primary sectors. And immediately in the aftermath of partition, something which General Greva just mentioned to you about Lahore and then the move to Delhi, the bulk of the population we had to face, especially with in both the western and the eastern sectors, major move towards rehabilitation, rationing, community development. But not only were the services able to step into the shoes of the predecessors, but they did an even better job. Because the task of nation building, the task of rehabilitation, the task of working together is far more difficult than the task of issuing a CRPC order and landing people in jail. The task of governance and development is a far more complicated task than the mechanical implication of maintaining peace. Maintaining peace is, or through the use of force, is a relatively easier and a simpler affair. And the reason why this was possible is the point which the Chief Secretary mentioned earlier. The possible because of the trust between the political leadership and the administrative hierarchy. In fact, we are so glad that the Honorable Chief Minister Prem Singh ji has been sitting here with us for the last 4 hours, and he's been listening very attentively to all the presentations from the districts. It is this element of trust, confidence, which will inspire the younger generation of officers put their best foot forward. In fact, let me also mention here the counterfactual. Wherever the political leadership has not trusted the civil services or has played havoc with the way civil services are running, we have the example of the neighboring country of Pakistan, where civil services were systematically demolished, first by the two military regimes, then by Mr. Bhutto, then again by Ziaul Haq, again by all the military generals, that today there is not possible for the civil services or the civil society in Pakistan to stand up to the challenges which this society faces. Therefore, both in terms of understanding the role of what civil services do, we should also look at where all civil services were not given the protection of 311, where all civil services did not have the ability to speak out their mind, where all civil services did not stand up to the government. We have seen how those societies have fared, and therefore full compliments to all our colleagues in the Indian administrative, in police, forest, all the constituent services, because we've shown through our mettle that we can stand up and face any challenge. Therefore, great institutions are those which learn from the past, retain the unique values which the past has to offer, and also be as nimble and as flexible as the situation demands. For example, what defines the civil service? As the four presentations showed us today, it is all about ease of living. So whether it was the great initiative of the health department, whether it was the initiative that we saw from the child protection officer, whether we saw the biometric attendants, everything is moving towards ease of living, towards ease of governance, towards ease of doing business. So today, governance is not about just enforcement. Today, governance is about doing the right things. It's about making the transition from control to facilitation, because we believe that an empowered citizen, a citizen who is more empowered, a citizen who knows what he or she has to do, a person, when you know or when you explain to them why compliance is required, it is a much better way to do things rather than push things down the throats of people. So it is in a spirit of partnership that we are all working together. In fact, from the Prime Minister onwards, what are the themes which are being talked about? We are talking about empowerment of the citizen. We are talking about local for vocal. We are talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat. We are talking about Ek Bharat, Shresth Bharat. We are talking and saying that governance is not an end in itself, but it is the means to an end. It is the means to creating better citizens, better human beings, and it is in this complex that we have a much better version of India, a much better version of Sikkim and Uttarakhand and West Bengal, and all of us have to work together to this end. Now I talk about the future, because I talked about the past, I talked about the present. Let me talk about the future and how I look at India, how I look at the civil services, and I'm so glad that this topic has come up. Reimagining India, is it just the mandate of the political leadership? Is it just the mandate of economists? Is it just the mandate of the media? Is it just the mandate of academicians? No, I think, as was pointed out by the Vice Chancellor earlier, and what Suresh had earlier mentioned, it is everybody's responsibility to reimagine India. And we, who are directly involved in the process of governance, have an even more important role in reimagining India. Because, Ravindran started by talking about dharma and karma at the very beginning, which also brings me to something which I read a few weeks ago about what constitutes the Raj Dharma. Now, the Raj Dharma, of course, essentially constitutes of three powers. Raj Dharma is Raj Shakti, Mantrana Shakti, and Utsaha Shakti. Now, certainly, Raj Shakti is the domain of the political leadership. They will set the direction, they will set the tone. But Raj Shakti by itself is not sufficient. Raj Shakti has to be supplemented and complemented by Mantrana Shakti. Mantrana Shakti is the core competence and the core domain of the civil servant, the professional civil servant, who must say, this is what you want, but this is how it must be done. The nuts and bolts, the implication, the connects that happen thereby is what Mantrana Shakti is. And that is why it is Raj Shakti working together with Mantrana Shakti. And last but not the least, Utsaha Shakti. With what confidence, with what caliber, with what verb am I going to do my job? So it is when these three Shaktis will combine that we will actually take India onto the next growth trajectory. Because the India of the future that we look at, I am aware that because of COVID, our goals of moving towards the 5 trillion economy in the next 3 years is not going to happen. We should not be living in a dream world, but for COVID, that was what we were aspiring for. We were aspiring for a 5 trillion economy. And now also I would only say that it has been delayed. It is not a target that we have left off, it's a target that has been delayed because of COVID. And how do we get to a 5 trillion economy? We get to a 5 trillion economy when each of our district plans works well. We get to a 5 trillion economy when there is greater efficiency in the use of whatever resources we have. We get into a 5 trillion economy when we not only look at physical infrastructure, but we also look at India's soft power. Any visitor who comes to Changu Lake, any visitor who comes to Pemayang, any visitor who steps into Sikkim, or for that matter Varanasi or Agra or Dehradun, must go back, must feel as a brand ambassador. So that is exactly what you and I are responsible for. This is exactly what you and I are going to do. Friends, the future belongs to youth. And one of the best things about the civil services is that every year we have a fresh intake of people. People who bring in very strong energy. People who have a vested interest in ensuring that the system continues to run well. Therefore, it is this churn, it is this willingness and the ability to bring change that gives me a lot of confidence. Friends, the future belongs to those who understand technology. Given the large number of entrants into the civil services from the IITs and the RECs, law graduates, it is very clear that this generation will leverage both technology and policy in all facets of administration. It will be possible for us to engage in zero transaction costs and time, something that we had still not envisaged. The future is about information in all its dimensions, ease of access, connecting dots, linking birth certificates with ICS, with ICDS, primary schools, and education. One more thing before I close, and that is that sometimes I feel there is a sense of despondency because sometimes we want the civil services wish to be complimented for everything we do. Now, it's good if we get complimented, but it doesn't matter if we are not complimented. Friends, our inspiration has to be our own work. Our inspiration has to be the opportunity that we have to serve our motherland. The elite motive of the IAS is yoga karma sukha. That is, yoga is skill in action. That the best action, the best of your resources has to be put into the practice of doing the best. And it is this excellence which should be the elite motive. We should not be carried away by some criticism here or some criticism there. This will keep on happening. You know, just about the time when Suresh and I were joining the service, in the year 1984, there was a very interesting book by David Potter. It was called India's Political Administrators. David Potter, in 1984, said that the epitaph of the IAS is around the corner because he said that the powers of judiciary or the judicial powers of the district magistrate have been taken away under the 1973 amendment of the CRPC, and that because the Panchayati Raj amendments are likely to happen, therefore development functions will be with the panchayats, the judicial functions will be with the judiciary, and therefore what the hell should the civil services be doing? Now I think nothing could have been further from truth. In the last 40 years, not only has the domain of our work increased, the quality of our work increased, but let me say that the kind of work that we are doing has made a tremendous change. Today, we are more and more focused on rights-based legislation. Today, the civil services is delivering the right to work, the right to food, and the right to education. And these are rights which are citizen rights. These are not rights which are there because these are rights which every citizen can now ask of us. These are rights, and I think all of us are very privileged that today we are performing the very important task of creating a new India. Therefore, the future that we have is a future in which we are connected with those who need us the most. The future is for us to create, the future is for us to envision, and on this occasion of the Civil Services Day, let me congratulate all of you who are present here, all of you who are not present here, because this is a very important day for us, and I must thank Suresh and all my colleagues here for having given me this opportunity to address you. Thank you very much. Jai Hind, Jai Sikkim, Jai Bharat, Jai Civil Services. Thank you.